The Bible and politics are intricately linked, yet society often discourages discussions about either in polite company. This unwritten rule to avoid religion and politics as topics of conversation appears hypocritical when examined against the foundational principles of many nations, particularly those built on biblical ideals and political revolution. The history of governance and religion shows their profound influence on each other. The United States, for instance, was established on values that intertwine biblical morality with democratic principles. The Declaration of Independence references unalienable rights, endowed by a creator, while early laws drew from Judeo-Christian ethics. Similarly, political movements like the abolition of slavery and civil rights drew heavily from religious teachings about justice and equality. Yet, there seems to be a calculated effort by both the government and the church to suppress open dialogue on these topics, deeming them too divisive. This suppression could be viewed as a strategy to avoid exposing contradictions. While the government might shy away from religious discourse to maintain secularism, the church often avoids politics to maintain unity within congregations. Both institutions, however, owe much of their historical and ideological power to the intersection of religion and governance. This avoidance creates a paradox. A nation shaped by religion and politics now discourages its citizens from openly engaging with these same forces. It suggests a fear of self-reflection, a reluctance to confront how deeply intertwined these elements are in shaping identity, laws, and moral frameworks. In silencing these discussions, society perpetuates a kind of cultural amnesia, where individuals are discouraged from examining how religion influences laws or how politics shapes religious freedom. The hypocrisy lies not just in the silence but in the selective application of these influences. Politicians may invoke scripture when it suits their agenda, while religious leaders may selectively engage with political issues that align with their beliefs. If we are to address the challenges of our time, the solution is not to avoid discussing religion and politics but to engage with them thoughtfully and respectfully. Only through honest dialogue can the inherent hypocrisies be confronted, leading to a society that acknowledges its roots and strives for integrity in its actions. From the very beginning, it appears this suppression of discussions on religion and politics was part of a calculated strategy, a plan to divide the people and pave the way for a one-world leader or even the prophesied Antichrist. By fostering chaos and confusion, and then offering a false peace, this scheme shifts people's focus away from Yehovah, God, and draws them toward a centralized, human-led authority. At the heart of this strategy lies an attack on the true nature of God and His Son, Jesus. Over time, the narrative has subtly shifted, portraying Jesus as merely a man, a product of human imagination fabricated by the concept of the Trinity. This distorted image serves to undermine the divine nature of Jesus as the Son of God, leading people to question His divinity and the authority of Yehovah. By promoting the idea that God is a man and human in nature, the plan creates confusion about the Creator's sovereignty. This perception aligns perfectly with the goal of centralizing power in human institutions and leaders, ultimately steering humanity toward the worship of man rather than God. The Trinity, while intended to reflect the unity of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, has often been misrepresented in ways that reduce God's holiness to human terms, solidifying the premise that God is no different from humanity. This deception plays a crucial role in the broader agenda. A world divided by chaos and stripped of its spiritual foundation becomes desperate for order. In such desperation, people are more willing to accept a figure who promises unity, peace, and prosperity, a figure who, in reality, diverts them further from the truth of God's Word. This one-world leader, heralded as a savior, may very well lead humanity into deeper spiritual darkness. The Bible itself warns of this great deception, cautioning believers to remain vigilant and rooted in the truth. The goal has always been to draw people away from the Creator, replacing faith in Yehovah with allegiance to human systems and leaders. This is why the suppression of religious and political discourse is so effective. It prevents individuals from recognizing the connections between spiritual truth and worldly power. The challenge for believers is to discern the underlying plan and resist the pull of false promises. Only by staying grounded in the teachings of Yehovah and the true message of Jesus can humanity see through the facade and reclaim its spiritual purpose. The path back to truth begins with acknowledging the grand deception and committing to dialogue and faith that transcends the boundaries imposed by human institutions. There are several key historical events and movements before World War I that can be tied into the overarching narrative of global power consolidation, technological advancements, and the rise of centralized control systems. Here are some significant pre-World War I events to consider. The Enlightenment, spanning the 17th and 18th centuries, championed the power of human reason, empiricism, and individual liberties. Philosophers like John Locke, Voltaire, and Immanuel Kant questioned traditional authority, particularly that of the Church, and sought to apply rational thought to society, governance, and morality. This intellectual shift emphasized secularism, arguing for the separation of religious influence from public and political life. While this era laid the foundation for advancements in science, democracy, and personal freedoms, it also contributed to the rise of centralized state authority. As monarchies and later republics began adopting Enlightenment ideals, they replaced religious institutions as the primary source of societal control. Concepts like the social contract and public education were rooted in Enlightenment thought but also facilitated the consolidation of power in the hands of secular governments and bureaucracies. Key tie-in 1. The push to replace religious authority with state and intellectual authority mirrors modern efforts to establish scientific or technocratic governance systems. Just as Enlightenment thinkers emphasized reason and empirical evidence over faith, contemporary systems often elevate scientific consensus and technology as arbiters of truth and policy. This has led to growing concerns about centralized decision-making being framed as rational and infallible. Key tie-in 2. The Enlightenment also planted the seeds for global agendas by encouraging the standardization of knowledge, laws, and governance under secular, rational principles. Today's global institutions, such as the UN or WHO, can trace their philosophical lineage to these ideas, which sought to transcend local, religious, or cultural divisions for a universal framework of governance and progress. Key tie-in 3. The recurring tension between empowering individuals with knowledge and centralizing authority highlights a historical cycle. Just as the Enlightenment shifted power from religious elites to secular rulers, modern systems risk consolidating power under technocratic elites, potentially creating new forms of dogma under the guise of progress. While the Enlightenment opened doors to freedom and innovation, it also set the stage for centralized systems that could later be wielded for global agendas, echoing debates in today's world about the balance between liberty and control. The Industrial Revolution marked a pivotal shift in human history, transforming economies from agrarian-based systems into industrial powerhouses. This era introduced mechanized production and large-scale manufacturing, enabling economies to grow at unprecedented rates. With these changes came a concentration of wealth and power, as industrialists and select nations gained control over critical resources, infrastructure, and the means of production. The rise of factories and urbanization altered social structures, leading to the emergence of a working class and the decline of traditional agrarian livelihoods. Mass production also set the stage for the development of global trade systems. Goods could now be produced at scale, standardized, and distributed worldwide, paving the way for interconnected markets. This era not only shaped the modern global economy but also laid the groundwork for the technological and social changes that followed. Key tie-ins. Centralization of economic power. The Industrial Revolution centralized wealth and control over production, as a few industrialists and corporations dominated industries such as textiles, steel, and railroads. This trend of economic consolidation has persisted, foreshadowing the digital age, where tech giants and multinational corporations wield immense influence over global markets. Global interconnectivity. The revolution's advancements in transportation and communication, e.g., railways, steamships, and the telegraph, made global trade systems possible. These innovations mirror today's digital networks, where information and commerce flow seamlessly across borders, further centralizing economic power. Technological disruption. Just as the Industrial Revolution disrupted traditional industries and ways of life, the digital revolution has similarly transformed sectors such as media, retail, and manufacturing. Both periods highlight how technological advancements can redefine societal norms and economic dynamics. Emergence of new social classes. The rise of a working class during the Industrial Revolution parallels the creation of new classes in the digital age, such as gig workers and digital nomads, highlighting the ongoing evolution of labor structures in response to technological change. Sustainability challenges. The Industrial Revolution's reliance on fossil fuels initiated environmental concerns that persist today. This historical reliance underscores current efforts to balance industrial and technological advancement with sustainability and environmental stewardship. By drawing these parallels, the Industrial Revolution not only becomes a historical milestone but also a lens through which to understand and anticipate the dynamics of the digital era. Groups such as the Freemasons, Illuminati, and other secret societies gained substantial influence during this period, often operating behind the scenes to shape political, cultural, and economic movements. The Freemasons, with their hierarchical structure and rituals, became a significant force in promoting Enlightenment ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity, often aligning with revolutionary movements that sought to upend monarchy and feudalism. Meanwhile, the Illuminati, a Bavarian secret society founded in 1776, pursued a secular, rationalist worldview that directly challenged traditional religious and political structures. They sought to dismantle the influence of organized religion and aristocratic privilege, replacing them with meritocratic and scientific principles. Key tie-ins: shadow agendas and global governance. The activities of these secret societies highlight the idea of shadow agendas, plans and influences that shape major global events without public knowledge. Their operations suggest a world where key decisions are made not by elected officials but by powerful, hidden groups working behind closed doors. Theories surrounding global governance and elite cabals. Cultural and political shaping. Secret societies like the Freemasons played a pivotal role in the cultural shift towards modernity. By fostering ideas of freedom and secular governance, they subtly influenced the architecture of modern democracies. Their role in revolutionary movements like the American and French revolutions exemplifies their impact on reshaping the political landscape. Control of knowledge and power. These groups often controlled access to knowledge, influencing education, philosophy, and the arts. This mirrors contemporary concerns about the monopolization of information by elites and raises questions about who decides what knowledge is disseminated and why. Symbolism and psychological influence. The use of symbols, rituals, and coded communication by these societies illustrates how psychological tools can consolidate group identity and loyalty while projecting power. This ties into the broader concept of how symbolism can be employed to subtly influence public perception. Interplay of rationalism and mysticism. While the Illuminati and Freemasons championed rationalism and science, their secretive nature and use of mysticism created an intriguing paradox. This duality underscores the tension between transparency and secrecy in societal progress, a theme that resonates in debates about open governance versus classified operations. Timeless influence. The persistent allure of secret societies reflects humanity's fascination with exclusivity, power, and the unknown. Their historical impact parallels ongoing discussions about the role of private clubs, think tanks, and international organizations in shaping our world today. By exploring these themes, the influence of secret societies becomes a lens through which we can examine the intersection of power, secrecy, and societal transformation. Their legacy invites us to question who truly holds the reins of global governance and how unseen forces continue to mold our collective future. Napoleon's conquests were not just about military dominance, they were an effort to unify Europe under a centralized French system, spreading revolutionary ideals of nationalism, meritocracy, and codified law. His wars shattered old feudal structures, weakened monarchies, and laid the foundation for modern nation-states, fostering economic and political systems that continue to shape the world today. Key tie-ins to global unification. European integration. Napoleon's vision of a unified Europe foreshadowed later efforts such as the European Union, which seeks political and economic cohesion to prevent future conflicts, an idea rooted in controlling nationalism rather than spreading it. Global governance. His ambition mirrors modern movements toward international unity, from the League of Nations to the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, and discussions on a centralized global authority. These organizations work toward a world governed by shared laws, economic policies, and even military cooperation, much like Napoleon's attempt at European standardization. Legal and administrative reforms. The Napoleonic Code not only influenced European legal systems but also shaped global law, much like today's push for international legal frameworks through the International Criminal Court and World Trade Organization, which set precedents for a unified legal order. Nationalism versus centralization. Napoleon's campaigns sparked both nationalist uprisings and centralized governance, two opposing forces that still shape global politics today. While nationalism fuels sovereignty movements, global institutions push for interconnected governance, regional trade blocs, and military alliances, all steps toward a potential one-world government. Technology and economic integration. Where Napoleon used military conquest to spread his vision, today's globalists use digital infrastructure, economic policies, and AI-driven governance to integrate nations into a single economic and political system, one that transcends borders much like his empire once attempted. While Napoleon failed to unify Europe under French rule, his legacy of centralized authority, legal reform, and economic standardization set the stage for modern efforts to unite the world under a single governing system. The question remains: will global unification come through cooperation, or will history repeat itself through conquest and resistance? The Congress was a critical step towards centralized control over international relations, as it sought to systematically reorganize Europe rather than allowing unchecked warfare or national ambitions to dictate the continent's fate. By formalizing diplomatic cooperation and promoting collective security, it introduced the idea that supranational governance, where multiple nations abide by agreed-upon rules, could be a mechanism for maintaining stability. This aligns with the One World Order concept in several ways. Supranational oversight. The Congress established principles that weakened absolute national sovereignty by making European powers accountable to a larger diplomatic framework. Future global organizations would later adopt this model. Collective security and balance of power. The Congress of Vienna introduced a multi-nation cooperative system to deter aggression. This is a direct predecessor to organizations like the League of Nations, 1919, and later the United Nations, 1945. Which institutionalized collective security on a global scale. Precedent for global governance. The Congress of Vienna was one of the first major diplomatic summits where leading powers collaborated to redraw borders, manage conflicts, and impose ideological control, principles that later international institutions would refine and expand. Suppression of nationalist movements. A key element of the Congress was its resistance to nationalist uprisings and revolutionary movements, which could threaten the carefully crafted balance. This foreshadowed modern efforts by global institutions to mediate civil conflicts and prevent unilateral national actions that disrupt international stability. Control through diplomacy. Instead of purely military dominance, the Congress exemplified managing world affairs through diplomatic mechanisms, which became a model for later systems of international law and agreements. The Rothschild family rose to prominence in the 19th century, establishing one of the most powerful financial dynasties in history. Their banking empire spanned across Europe, with key branches in London, Paris, Frankfurt, Vienna, and Naples. Through strategic alliances, insider knowledge, and vast financial resources, they played a crucial role in shaping the modern financial system. Their influence extended beyond banking into infrastructure development, industrial investments, and even political affairs. The Rothschilds financed wars, including the Napoleonic Wars, and supported governments in times of economic turmoil, reinforcing their role as kingmakers in European geopolitics. Key tie-ins to today. Centralized banking and digital currency systems. The Rothschild banking model laid the foundation for today's central banking system, which has evolved into a globally interconnected financial network. Institutions like the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, ECB, and the International Monetary Fund, IMF, operate within frameworks that echo the centralized control once wielded by elite banking families. With the rise of digital currencies and the push towards central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, financial power is becoming even more concentrated, mirroring the historical influence of the Rothschilds. The Great Reset and economic restructuring. Initiatives like the World Economic Forum's WEF, Great Reset advocate for restructuring of the global economy, emphasizing digital finance, sustainable investments, and state-controlled economic systems. This echoes the past influence of elite financial dynasties that dictated market trends, controlled credit, and influenced government policies. The same mechanisms of debt financing, economic intervention, and wealth consolidation persist, but in more digitized and globally coordinated forms. Agenda 2030 and AMP, Financial Control Mechanisms. The push for sustainable development through Agenda 2030 includes financial tools such as carbon credits, digital IDs, and universal basic income, UBI, all of which align with a broader vision of centralized economic oversight. Just as elite banking families once shaped international economies through loans and credit control, today's global financial policies aim to regulate wealth distribution and economic access through digital tracking and ESG, environmental, social, and governance, scoring. The rise of private investment groups. While the direct influence of historical banking families has faded from public view, their legacy lives on through powerful investment groups like BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, which control trillions in assets and influence global markets. These modern financial giants operate similarly to the 19th century banking dynasties, shaping corporate policies, political decisions, and economic trends from behind the scenes. Financial surveillance and AMP, cashless societies. The transition toward a cashless economy, driven by digital payment systems and blockchain-based finance, further consolidates financial control. With CBDCs and AI-driven financial oversight, governments and financial institutions have unprecedented power over personal transactions, much like the Rothschilds once wielded through their extensive banking networks. The financial structures pioneered by elite families in the 19th century have evolved into a complex web of global economic control, digital oversight, and centralized banking systems. The themes of wealth consolidation, financial influence over governments, and control over the economic destiny of nations remain just as relevant today as they were during the rise of the Rothschilds. Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species marked a turning point in human thought by providing a naturalistic explanation for the diversity of life. By emphasizing natural selection as the driving force of evolution, Darwin challenged the traditional, religious view that life was the result of divine creation. Over time, as scientific discoveries continued to validate and expand upon evolutionary theory, secularism gained greater traction, gradually diminishing the role of religious institutions in shaping public policy, education, and governance. The rise of secularism and the shift toward scientific rationalism. The widespread acceptance of evolution and other scientific theories laid the foundation for a worldview that prioritizes empirical evidence and rational inquiry over faith-based explanations. This shift led to an increasing reliance on science and technology to address societal challenges, from healthcare to environmental issues, reinforcing a system in which decisions are made based on data and efficiency rather than religious or spiritual considerations. As a result, secularism became deeply embedded in education, governance, and global institutions, further marginalizing religious influence. The role of science and technology in global governance. As secularism expanded, the emergence of a world order driven by technological advancement and scientific rationalism became more plausible. The rapid development of artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and surveillance systems has enabled centralized decision-making structures that transcend national and cultural boundaries. This has led to the gradual consolidation of power into global institutions that prioritize technological progress and economic stability over traditional religious and national identities. The one-world government and the supremacy of technocratic control. With the decline of religious authority, the groundwork is being laid for the consolidation of governance under a unified global system, one that prioritizes efficiency, economic stability, and scientific progress above all else. A one-world government, guided by technocratic elites, would seek to standardize policies on climate change, public health, and artificial intelligence regulation, reducing the influence of local religious or ideological differences. Under such a system, spirituality and faith-based decision-making would be viewed as obstacles to progress, further reinforcing secular control. In this framework, technological advancements serve as both the means and justification for centralization, as global crises, such as pandemics, economic instability, and environmental disasters, are used to legitimize the need for a unified governing body. Over time, traditional structures, whether national governments or religious institutions, become obsolete, replaced by a system that values scientific rationalism as the ultimate authority. The establishment of humanitarian organizations like the Red Cross marked a turning point in global crisis response, setting a precedent for international cooperation in humanitarian aid. These early organizations provided a framework for coordinating relief efforts across borders, reinforcing the idea that global crises required collective action rather than isolated national responses. Over time, this principle extended beyond humanitarian efforts to influence broader international governance structures. The concept of global health initiatives, such as the World Health Organization, WHO, follows this trajectory. Originally designed to address medical emergencies and disease outbreaks, these institutions now play a significant role in shaping global policies on public health, emergency preparedness, and even economic strategies related to health crises. Through mechanisms like international treaties, funding agreements, and policy coordination, these organizations have helped consolidate decision-making power into centralized global entities. This progression aligns with the broader idea of a one world government by reinforcing the necessity of supranational governance. As nations become increasingly reliant on global organizations for crisis management, economic stability, and security, sovereignty becomes more interconnected, sometimes even subordinated, to overarching global policies. While proponents argue that such integration is essential for addressing large-scale challenges, critics warn that it can erode national autonomy and concentrate power in unelected global institutions. The globalization of humanitarian aid thus serves as both a historical foundation and a modern justification for deeper international governance, shaping the way crises are managed and reinforcing the movement towards centralized global authority.
A part of that plan, of course, is to induce the gradual surrender of American sovereignty, piece by piece and step by step, to various international organizations, of which the United Nations is the outstanding but far from the only example. Here are the aims for the United States. 1. Greatly expanded government spending for every conceivable means of getting rid of ever larger sums of American money as wastefully as possible. 2. Higher and then much higher taxes. 3. An increasingly unbalanced budget, despite the higher taxes. 4. Wild inflation of our currency. 5. Government controls of prices, wages, and materials, supposedly to combat inflation. 6. Greatly increased socialistic controls over every operation of our economy and every activity of our daily lives. This is to be accompanied, naturally and automatically, by a correspondingly huge increase in the size of our bureaucracy and in both the cost and reach of our domestic government. 7. Far more centralization of power in Washington and the practical elimination of our state lines. There is a many-faceted drive at work to have our state lines eventually mean no more within the nation than our county lines do now within the states. 8. The steady advance of federal aid to and control over our educational system, leading to complete federalization of our public education. 9. A constant hammering into the American consciousness of the horror of modern warfare, the beauties and the absolute necessity of peace. Peace always on communist terms, of course. And 10, the consequent willingness of the American people to allow the steps of appeasement by our government which amount to a piecemeal surrender of the rest of the free world and of the United States itself.